afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another Propagandacast. Lehr with me, your host, Imperial Dane, the master of propaganda. We're off here to cover the 17-pounder gun available here to the British forces. Available non-doctrinally, which pretty much means it's the biggest non-doctrinal anti-tank gun here, available from the company command post, more specifically available to be built once you got the company command post up. The 17-pounder gun presents a rather large piece of anti-tank weaponry. It's also set up as an emplacement, which means it's actually incredibly hard to decrew. You have to sort of basically burn it almost down, and then I think there's a chance of it being decrewed. Otherwise, it means, overall, it's not going to be easy. It's not something your opponent can just run infantry up to and that way deal with. That means it's also like the Pack 43 and such actually can, do an incredible large amount of damage to any tanks that come from the mid-range. It also, of course, is more fixed, which certainly poses certain limitations as well to the firepower, or what you sort of place it with. And of course, as the your rule here again with other emplacement issues, you want it to be part of the defense, but you don't want it to be the defense. If it is the defense, it becomes also the target. If it's part of a defense, it is a target, and again, your opponent has to prioritize and think about things. Things you certainly also can consider is actually laying down mines at certain points to make it harder to rush, but also to allow, for opponent vehicles to attack it, or even come within sight of fire unknowingly in the first place, gets, hit, immobilized, or either way have a very hard time of getting out of its ring of fire, and then, allowed to be quickly knocked out. Of course, another thing to consider is overall terrain. As it gets veterans, you can allow it to shoot through terrain, but that's nothing I think you should overall be counting on, since it's a veterans 1 ability. Overall, consider larger or more open areas of terrain that will set it up there, so, try and deny that area, make that no go for enemy tanks. Overall, funneling them in towards other areas where they can sort of, pair things, or maybe set up another 17-pounder gun if you're that crazy. But overall, consider again positioning. Again, when it comes to placements, positioning is very important, in particular the bigger they are. The better you can position them, overall better. You don't want them to be too far away where there's going to have, no influence, but not too far either, again, where it's going to become a target. If you sort of consider the situation here, this is an alright position, but I was around here, probably pretty easy to be able to cover here, here, but at the same time, it's not going to be something, the first thing, that his opponent's going to be shooting at. It's not going to be the 17-pounder gun. So those are some details there. Overall, again, consider as a part of a larger defense. Mines are good, maybe a buffers, maybe emplacements of other kinds, like the mortars, maybe some infantry in a trench. There are options there, so that we'll consider with the 17-pounder gun. Veterancy wise, it gains basically piercing shot for veterancy 1, veterancy 2, less scatter, more accuracy, which all means just going to hit a lot better, and veterancy 3 gains better rate of fire. You can sort of then, of course, either crew it or set up forward assembly support, which allows you to basically have an even higher rate of fire, faster rotation, and fire flares. Flares can also be helpful, but again, since it's going to be part of a larger defense, perhaps not so much. The only way it's going to be useful is if you place it all on its own with nothing to really spot for it, which is what, as we previously mentioned, is not very recommendable. Again, if you get it there, again, it becomes even better. And throw in veterancy 3, for example, and the 17-pounder gun is going to be an absolute nightmare for any German panzer. And of course, again, you can use piercing shots to make it even harder for the opponent's game. Perhaps in that way, you can, in conjunction with that, use fire flare to again ensure there is no running from the 17-pounder gun. But again, they're very potent, but again, it is static, so again, you want to consider things, and of course, you want to have, have measures for dealing with whatever the opponent might bring up to counter that in return. Overall, it's a big anti-tank counter, but again, it's also static, and in that sense, opponent will try and bring up counters. Consider the whole situation. What does your opponent have? Well, if, for example, come a lot more resource to counter it, in which case, perhaps less considered, but on the other hand, again, depending on his playstyle, it could be very effective. For example, your opponent has a lot of, say, panzers, but not a lot of other support weapons. 17-pounder gun in the right position can do a lot of damage. So overall, it's something to consider there with a 17-pounder gun. Consider the battlefield, consider the situation, consider your needs, consider what your opponent has. If you can sort of balance that, you should probably find some positions there where the 17-pounder gun can do absolutely marvelous work versus any enemy tank. And again, it can pretty much deal with most armor in the right conditions. So that's a little thing there to consider as well. But again, overall, part of a larger defense, consider positioning and consider what your opponent has at the field currently, and what he could possibly bring up to counter it. And of course, if he's actually going to do it, because you might alter other things to threatens in different ways. Again, specifically going down on the 17-pounder gun might not necessarily be the best option. So I mean, there are a lot of things there to consider in terms of strategy, which again is what a real-time strategy game is about, amongst other things. Strategy. But overall, I think that really sort of covers the 17-pounder gun. As for dealing with it, smoke is one option. I mean, smoke it directly, rush up. Otherwise, shoot it, force it to cause base structure. Anti-tank and sensor good work. Mortars, any kind of artillery, rocket artillery is less effective. Flamethrowers, when you get close again, smoke. Even if you say for your flamethrower vehicles, I mean, that's an option as well, though perhaps not the best option. And again, sort of consider, what part of the defense is. If it's on its own, again, just rush what you have, deal with it. Again, part of a larger defense. I mean, smoke again is going to be necessary. Perhaps a mine switch just in case it's laid down mines around it. I mean, those are all things to consider. Of course, also consider the positioning. I mean, is it really in this sort of position where you really have to deal with it, or as you, for example, made it a bit of a poor position, in which case you can actually perhaps easily avoid it, in which case, do so. I mean, there's nothing worse than having built something and then having a waste of resource. I mean, that can actually become a psychological factor then for your opponent, again, just feeling like he's just wasted resource on that, in which case, good job. So, I mean, all little details they consider during the fighting. And again, you can consider that you should, A, be able to get more use out of it, and if you're playing against it, you should probably be able to deal with it more easily. But again, overall, consider the situation, and don't underestimate the 17-pounder gun. It can be quite vicious, and I do believe it can take out, for example, most medium tanks in about 2 shots, which it's not exactly bad, since it costs less than a medium tank, I do believe. So there you go. I hope you enjoyed this Propagandacast. Hopefully it has enlightened you, brought you greater wisdom and tactical and strategic understanding of the game. If it did, feel free to subscribe, tell a friend, share it with everyone, but not your enemies. We don't like those bastards. And, press like, as again, pressing like allows more people to see it. So thank you all, and see you all another time. Bye.